I'm Dan Morris, you're watching Bosun Dan Bushcraft, and today you're joining me from my second home, the Adrenaline Activity Centre, because today we're going to be doing some archery. Target face peg, always handy. So what we're going to do today is basically a little bit of a beginner's guide into the wonderful world of target archery. I apologise if you can hear lots of strange noises going on. We are on an active farm and I'm here running vehicles and letting engines run over for a bit because it's the winter season and there's a lot of equipment that's not really done well. There's not a lot of equipment, there's one truck. I don't know why I said that, but it's not done much, so I come and start it up, make sure everything's good. So if you hear engines running and things going on, it'll be farm traffic. There's always people driving up and down the farm and things like that, so try not to let that noise put you off. So first things first, archery, it is an incredibly safe activity and it is a very fun hobby. I certainly enjoy it. I've been doing archery for an incredibly long time. I am an archery instructor and have been for quite a while as well. Many years I've been doing that for. You can actually book to do archery with me here at Adrenaline. I'll put a link or a picture of the sign or something up later on so you can see if you wish to book an activity. Now, archery, it is something that you could do in your own back garden, assuming that you have the space and a sensible attitude and a half decent backstop. And on that note, arrows are stopped by billowing fabric or nets, so a good curtain behind a target would stop arrows leaving your garden. However, depending on your garden, if you live in a very small space, if your garden's not, take a look at your own gardens and think, would this realistically be a safe place for an archery range? Don't take what I've just said to mean, yeah, let's all run out and start throwing arrows up and down the yard, because that's not quite what I'm saying to you. But you do need about 10 meters length ideally to make it safe. On that note, most places where you will go would start you off on a 10-meter range. Often you'll get that much bigger. It's very rare, it should really be incredibly rare, that you would ever be shooting less than 10 meters. And the reason is arrows tend to continue to accelerate after they've left the bow. They don't really leave the bow at full speed. Well, on account of that, what happens is an arrow that's been in flight longer tends to penetrate more. So what you get if you shoot at really short distances is the arrow hasn't reached full speed. It'll have a nasty habit of hitting the target and bouncing back off. Now, because arrows, like darts and other flying pointy objects, have these things on the back of them, flights, when they bounce off, if they bounce off and come back far enough, they have a bit of a habit of turning themselves back around and coming back point first. And that's how flights work. If you was to throw an arrow hard enough, it would eventually level itself and fly as it's supposed to, point first. So that's why you don't want to be closer than 10 meters, really. It does become a bit more unsafe if you do that. So the bow itself, we are going to be using a recurve bow. This one's obviously been in the field over there at some point when we've been using it because it's a little bit muddy. This is a recurve bow, and it's called a recurve on account of it having these two curves in the limb shape here. And what that's all about is one curve acts off the other as you draw the string back, and you get a double acceleration from it. As you let the string go, one curve flexes at the same time as the other one, so you get two forms of acceleration, and that makes your arrow fly quite a bit quicker without it really costing you any more in power, as in becoming physically harder to draw the bow back. Now, the bows that we use at this centre, they are all around 22 pounds draw weight, and one of the worst mistakes people make when they start archery is they go out and buy themselves a ridiculously powerful bow. I have done years and years of shooting. I used to do little competitions and things like that, and the one that I used to shoot for that is still a recurve, and that was 35 pounds draw weight. Now that doesn't seem like a massive draw weight, but when you've got 60 arrows to shoot, it gets really tiring after a while. So don't overdo it. If you're buying a bow from anywhere, don't go mad, don't get the poundage ridiculous. So Recurves come in left or right-handed. A lot of bows don't. A lot of bows are ambidextrous. When you get things like what you see Legolas in Lord of the Rings leaping about with, or you know, your Robin Hood style or long bows, they're not. They don't have a left or right-handed because they're just a cylindrical piece of wood. They don't have this cut-out section here. The cut-out section is to remove something known as the archer's paradox, which I'm not going into great detail into because it's always a contentious issue, and the amount of lengthy discussions in my lifetime that I have got into about this archer's paradox, I have had enough. It's one of them, it's like asking somebody if Die Hard is a Christmas movie. But that's what that's all about, and that is also the only part of it that makes it left or right-handed. So a left-handed one, it's exactly the same, it's just a mirror image. So this straight piece would be on the other side. Now, the first thing that trips a lot of people up is if you're a right-handed archer, the bow is in your left hand and you're going to draw the string with your right hand, and vice versa if you're a lefty. And nothing is really set in stone with that sort of stuff. You get plenty of people who are left-handed happily shooting right-handed style, and vice versa, so it doesn't really matter. Now, these bows, recurves, are they're kind of the mainstay now of any archery centre. They are the workhorse of many a place. A very, very common type of bow, just because they work really, really well. Obviously, you've got your fancier things like your compound bows and all that sort of stuff with various sight systems, and you can put sight systems on these that work incredibly effectively. But as I'll say to anybody, hey, if you want to have all those gadgets and gizmos, that's great, but learn to shoot normally with none of that first, because if you can handle a bare recurve with no sights on it or any of that faffery, you'd very easily be able to use all the complex stuff then, you know, compound bows and things like that. Which, nothing against compound bows, it's just they're so accurate that, to me, you may as well buy a rifle. Anyway, so that's pretty much everything we really need to know about the bow. Simple little thing. Let's get on and, oh, noisy tractor coming. GoPro start. Right then, so first things first, loading the bow. Obviously it's going to be of no use whatsoever until you put an arrow on it. Now, when you're loading a bow, keep the bow down. As an instructor, I've seen so many weird ways people like to load bows. People do all sorts of crazy things, like they'll change hands with the bow and do all that. Why a right-handed person would suddenly choose to use the left hand for this, I don't know. The easiest way is to pick the arrow up from whatever you may have invested in an arrow quiver, or some people do like the back quivers. I know that for a lot of archers that's a contentious issue. I have one, I quite like it. But however you've got your arrows, they might just be in a little thing on the floor like this currently is, but pick them up from that space there in between the nock, that's your plastic clip at the very end, and the flights themselves. Take it over the bow, and then you can very easily and comfortably just clip it straight in between your two little brass rings, or whatever the system your bow might have to show that, and that's your knocking point where the arrow goes, and it'll go there every single time, because archery by and large, it is all about consistency, doing the same thing. Now, on all arrows, you will, well, not all arrows actually, that's a bit of a lie there, but on most arrows you'll have one flight that is a different colour. Known as the index feather, or it's everything in archery's got a million names. Some people call it the cock feather, signal feather. It's by and by, it's there to do the same thing. Now these arrows don't have one flight that's a different colour, on account that they are for compound bows. Now with compound bows, different arrow rests work in different ways. In some cases the arrow sits that way around, yeah, differently to the nock. So on these arrows, your index feather is marked by little stripe lines that I've drawn on it, and the whole point of all of that is to tell you that when you clip it on, it points away from the wooden arm there, and that is just so when it clips like that, it sticks outwards like that away from the wooden piece. Now if it didn't, it'll only clip on one of two ways. If I turn it around and put it on the incorrect way, you can see the obvious issue that's going to happen there. That little flight is going to slap into the wood, upset the back of the arrow, and ruin your shot for you. Now, arrows are a bit like steering narrow boats. Whatever you do to them, they'll do the opposite. So if you knock it left, it'll go right. Knock it up, it'll go down. They're just one of those things. But a bit of practice, and you can make your loading of the bow really quite quick and problem-free. Okay, we are now loaded and ready to go. GoPro stop. Apologies that it is a little dark under here, but I hope you can see well enough for what I'm doing. I'm wearing a finger tab. These are cheap, easy to get a hold of things, and it just protects your fingers from the string. Not everybody has any issue with that. Some people are just fine with it, but I don't know if it's because I've been doing it so long, but just recently it started to make my fingers ache a little bit. Right, so after you're all loaded up and ready to go, the next thing is your stance. You need to be completely sideways onto your target, feet, hips, and particularly your shoulders. And the reason for that is, if I draw this bow back now, you can see if I twist my shoulders, the arrow starts to slip forward and you're losing power off your draw. And all the power in the bow is right back here. If you're letting arrows off from there, they're just going to splash down into the floor. So make sure that particularly your feet are side onto that target. And when you start getting better and you start changing the targets that you're actually shooting at, your aim begins with the ankle of your lead leg. So if you're shooting right-handed style, it's your left leg that's pointing forwards. Now if I was shooting directly in front of me and then another target was over there, you wouldn't just twist your torso, you would change your footing so that your lead ankle is pointing at the target you want to hit. And the reason you do that is because if I've got it at draw and rotate my torso, I'm not noticing, but what's happening there is I'm losing draw power. And that loss of draw power is going to directly affect your aim and ruin all of that for you. So always point to your target with your lead leg, and that'll help keep all your draw and everything nice and tight. Because like I said, it is all about consistency. Once you're in stance and you're ready, bow arm out nice and straight, trying not to hyperextend that elbow. Some people are very flexible. Take the string with just 3 fingers, no thumb involved whatsoever, just underneath that arrow there, and try and touch every time with your index finger. Just be touching the lower brass ring. And again, that is all about consistency, because the marker point that you're going to draw to is going to be your index finger touching your face. And it's important to keep this the same every time. And I always get people say, oh, I was taught to put the finger above, and all these little things, it's about consistency. There's not really right or wrong answers. Now, I have shot with fingers above at different styles when there's sights on them. But here and now, we are only at 10 meters. And because that finger is going to be my marker on my face, if that arrow is above there, we're shooting at a flatter trajectory with the arrow. Because we're only at 10 meters, they're going to land high on the target anyway. We're going to have to aim low. If I've got one finger above, but my fingertip is still my marker, you can see now that the arrow is angling up slightly. So it'll send them even higher on the target than it would before. It's really more of a distance issue than anything else. So it's not wrong to do that. It's just at 10 meters, it works a lot easier to put it there. Now, as I said, your marker point on your face, in this case, is going to be index fingertip to the corner of my lips, just because it's a fixed, nice, easy, simple point to remember. Some people want a cheap draw, some people want to go to there. In reality, it doesn't matter all that much as long as you're doing the same thing every time. If you keep changing where you're drawing to, your shots are going to change. So this is why it's all about that consistency. So like I said, fingertip, just touch the lower brass ring there of the knot point, 3 fingers underneath it, draw it back, so that the arrow at your fingertip just comes to the corner of your lips. Your draw arm, you need to keep your elbow up. It hurts more if you're lower and you're not as powerful, and you can see instantly arrows pointing up when I do that. You start shooting higher on the target. Ideally, you're trying to draw a straight line from the arrow all the way up your arm, so as it makes one flat line, and that'll give you the best, most stable draw. Once you're in that draw position, you're going to aim using the arrow tip as you loop down it, and that's going to set your elevation on the target, your north to south. We'll go through aiming a little better after this. So as I've said, because we're only at 10 meters, it's going to land high on that target anyway. So as I'm looking down the arrow, I'm going to have to put it quite low down. So I'll try and show you what I mean a little more here. It's a bit tricky doing it like this. Like I say, first couple of, when you first start shooting, don't be worrying about accuracy to hitting the bullseye or anything like that. I'd only be worrying about getting groups, because everything else is correctable. But if you've got one in the floor, one in the curtain, and one somewhere else, it doesn't really tell you a lot of information. So I'm going to get in draw position, all nice, tight, locked up. I'm looking at the tip of my arrow. Now I know it's going to land high at 10 meters, so what I'm going to do is aim my arrow tip as if it's pointing at the white circles underneath the bullseye. And you can see I'm literally just touching the inside of the gold circle there. I mean, I've been doing this such a long time that I pretty much know where these bows are going to land anyway. I'm very used to using them here. I'll just do another one. Same thing again. Fingertip to the corner of my mouth. Set that arrow tip so that it's in that white below the gold. And again, just in the gold, but a little low that time. Now, you might have noticed already what I'm doing on the line of otherwise aiming, because the arrow tip itself is only actually setting for you your elevation on the target, your north to south. Your windage, your left to right, is coming from your backhand. So pretty much your elevation's coming from your bow hand, and then your left to right accuracy is coming from your string hand. Now, the way that you aim your left to right accuracy, your windage, comes from the string itself, and that's the very reason why I'm drawing to the corner of my mouth there. What that's doing for me is it's putting the bowstring directly in line with the eye that I am aiming with, so it's literally breaking through my aiming eye. Okay, and what I'm doing is, after I've set the elevation of the arrow tip on the target, as the string's there, I am lining the string up with the arrow so that it's either sitting directly to the side of the arrow, as in running right parallel along it, but what I do more than anything as I'm aiming down it is completely cover the arrow with the string. That way I know I'm leaving in a perfectly straight line when it comes out of that bow. That whole technique of drawing it to that part of your face, though, it does something else for you, because a lot of the time people struggle releasing the string and they tend to let their arms slip forward a little bit as they do. That ruins your aim, but it also ruins your power, because a few inches forward and you've lost so many pounds of pressure out of that bow that it just ruins the accuracy for you completely. So what I like to do, thumb knuckle there, and as you draw it back to that point on your lip, you can literally just lock that thumb knuckle behind your jawbone right there, and that'll stop you from letting your arm slip forward as you release that arrow, because you'll know, you'll feel it if you do it. You'll literally on your face. Now, like I said, there's different places, different people, they might tell you to use different marker points. That's fine. This one is just the one that I've sort of over time developed, because I know how accurate it gets after a while. You know, you get people, and after one session I've literally got them shooting pieces of string hanging down from the roof. When it's there on your face and it's all locked in and the string is in line with that eye and everything like that, that position does something else for you. It encourages you to just touch the string with your nose. Now, everybody, when I first say that, it's like, well, what does that matter? I can tell you exactly what it matters. If I'm looking, right now, I'm aiming this arrow directly at the lens of my GoPro. But if I lean my head back a little bit, to my perspective now, that arrow's dropped and it's low. So I'll raise it to compensate, and if I let this go now, even though it looks to be aimed directly at the camera, it would simply whip off over the top of the camera. So having your nose just touching the string there prevents you from tilting your head around, because any movement from the angle of your head as you look down the arrow is changing the aspect of your aim, so it'll tell you a lie. And usually what you find is, as people get a little more tired, they'll start to tilt their heads back a bit, which naturally encourages them to then compensate by aiming higher and higher and higher and higher, and then the arrows keep whipping up straight over the top of the target. So this consistency is all about getting yourself in those lock positions. Yeah, fingertip to the corner of the mouth, nose just touches the string, line that string up, down that arrow, set the height with the arrow tip, and away it goes. I'm not going to let this one go because I'm pointed at the cabin side and I don't want an arrow hanging out the cabin. So line your string up, get everything all nice and tight, set your aim point as in the height, then let it go. And that one's pretty close to the other one there. So once you've got used to all that and you've got your technique pretty much nailed down, because like I say, it is just all about that consistency, nose to string, all of that stuff we've already discussed. Once you've got that nailed down though, there is one more, well there's plenty more, like archery is one of them things you could just keep going and going and going really. But there is one big thing that really affects your windage. It pretty much always shows up in your windage than anything else. And it does seem to be a particular curse of recurve bows, and it's on account of this big flat piece of wood there. The arrow has to touch that as it passes by, and on account of that, your grip on the bow really affects your left to right accuracy. And what I mean by that, and this is the most natural thing in the world to do, and that's squeezing the bow. The harder you squeeze that bow, the more you're fighting against your own muscle tension when you draw that string back. And on account of that, when you let the string go, your hand flinches just a little bit. You probably won't even see or notice that because it's going to happen very, very quickly. But as you can see by looking at that little flat piece of wood there, the slightest little tilt or twist, and what's happening, it's moving actually quite a bit. And that upsets the arrow as it passes by and ruins your shot. And as I've said, that almost always shows itself up in your windage, your left to right accuracy. So what you've got to do is keep the grip on that bow about as gentle as you possibly can. I like to just link my finger and thumb like that, so that the bow is pretty much free of it. What you're doing really is, in that moment that you release that string, you're trying to be not a part of the machinery, okay? Now obviously it's very natural to want to squeeze that bow because you're trying to stop it from flying out of your hand when you let the string go, even though honestly you'd really struggle to break one of these by dropping them. Here we've got some bows that are possibly 20 years old now, still on the same limbs. They are incredibly tough things, but concentrate on that. You can get straps that just hold the bow, so if you do drop it, it'll just drop onto its strap and won't fall off. You'll see that when you see Olympic archers and stuff. I mean, they've got lots of equipment, which it's not my thing, all that kit. I've used it, but I prefer to keep it as basic as possible, because if you can do it basic, you know, it's like the old theory, like my dad always used to say, when I was learning to drive many years ago, you're better off doing it in a car that's a pile of junk, because if you can drive junk, you can drive anything good. And it's exactly the same with anything else. If you can do it with a rough example, then you can obviously do it with a better one. But concentrate on keeping that grip as light as possible, and your shots will start to tighten up. And that's also the one where once people start getting pretty good at it, they'll find they start dropping off a little bit, and the shots get a bit wobbly, and they're like, "Whoa, what is it?" And it'll almost always be that they are forgetting that, and they've started squeezing it again, and that really does give you that wobble. So just keep that in mind, keep that grip nice and loose. Now, another thing to say about archery is, I did mention that target archery in the average sense or centre or place is about as safe as an activity as you can do, really. This sounds a bit daft, but the number one risk of in target archery isn't actually getting shot. It's incredibly rare that that happens. It's the arrows walking into them when they're hanging out of the target. They can sometimes be difficult to see, especially in this case, white arrow, white target, that would be difficult to see, easy to walk into. The other favourite, which isn't an issue if you're on your own, but the other favourite is people hovering around behind you at the target when you're pulling your arrows back out, in which case your stabbing distance is going to be your arm span on an arrow, because what we've got here is called self-healing foam, and it's incredibly grippy. It really likes to hang on to your arrows as you pull them out, and as a consequence you end up really yanking at them to get them out. Well, anybody stood behind whilst you do that is going to get a jolly good old stabbing from it. In fact, I was delivering some archery for, I think it was a stag party actually, at a party barn that they'd rented. And I had just explained all of this, and then one poor unfortunate chap pulls an arrow out and stabbed himself in his own thigh with it. Now, I didn't do a great deal of damage, but you could certainly, you know, you could see a mark where he'd done it. And he turned around and looked at me and went, I feel so stupid, you've literally just said about that. I'm like, exactly. Another thing is taking care with your arrows, moving them about, carrying about. Now, obviously, these are pointy sticks. And the point is rather indiscriminate if you was to fall on it, so carrying your arrows around. One of the ways they used to say, which is a bit complex I suppose, is put your hand out, pretend you're checking for the rain, all the arrow tips in that hand, and just carry them behind you. So now if I was to trip over or anything, jettison those arrows out the way and I'm not going to fall on them. Easiest thing to think of though is just keep them out of your way. Silly little things, but you know, in archery, that's where the injuries happen. It's very rare that somebody actually gets hit. I've certainly never had it where somebody's been shot by a bow. And it's noisy farm traffic. It's pretty difficult, if not impossible, to shoot yourself with a bow. But safety first, then teamwork, and keep your arrows out the way so you don't trip over and hurt yourself, basically. So, a bit of advice on bows if you were looking to buy a bow for yourselves. Now, you don't have to spend a vast amount of money on bows. You can do, as with most things, you can spend fortunes on them. These particular recurves, I believe, were somewhere between either 130 to 150 quid to get something similar to this. But you don't need to. I've got, personally, bows ranging from all sorts of prices. I've even got one that I paid £11 for second-hand on eBay just because I like the look of it, and that's ended up being one of my favourites. When I come out shooting with friends, I almost exclusively use that little cheapy thing because it shoots, they're generally as good as each other. They shoot a straight line, basically. Now, if you are buying second-hand, you need to check out a couple of numbers. I mean, if you're buying new, you need to know a couple of numbers. Mostly if you're looking at a bow anywhere for sale, it will ask you two questions, and they will be what poundage you want it, as in how strong the bow is, but also your draw length, because obviously the draw length is going to affect both the power and accuracy. The draw length is going to affect everything. It's certainly going to affect how tall the bow is for you. Massively with a recurve. You don't really choose what length of bow you want. The length of bow sort of chooses you on account of your draw length. So that measurement for draw length, when you're looking at these things, is going to be basically the space between your thumb and fingers there to your maximum draw point, in which case that's going to be the corner of your lips. And that's what it means by draw length. It's that measurement, yeah, from here to here. When you're buying arrows, make sure that you are a good few inches longer than your maximum draw. Having an arrow that is too long is not a safety issue. Okay, it's not gonna be a problem. Having an arrow that's too short can be a safety issue, and I've seen that safety issue happen in real life. Not here at Madrenalin. I was actually at a different club a long time ago. But an arrow that's too short, it's very easy if you're new at it, or if you're a bit hard of thinking, it's very easy to pull it off the arrow rest and in that last minute shoot yourself through the hand with it. And I have seen that happen. So an arrow that's a couple of inches longer than necessary can prevent all of that. You can buy arrows made from all sorts of materials, carbon fibre, fiberglass, aluminium, all sorts of stuff. Some people would have different schools of thought on which ones they think are best. Personally, I think they're all about as good as each other. Just with particularly either carbon fibre or fiberglass, never use one if it's damaged, if it's got fibres sticking out, or if it's gone mad flexible. Fiberglass is an incredibly tough material to make an arrow out of, which is why a lot of people like them so much. They're very, very hard to damage, and unlike the aluminium ones, they don't stay bent. They straighten themselves out pretty effectively. Now, aluminium arrows are very, very light, very fast, but easily bent and damaged and ruined. So it's really personal preference. I prefer the heavier fiberglass ones, but then I usually use higher poundage bows, so it's not that extra weight's not really that much of an issue. It's entirely up to you what you want to use, but do remember, don't use one if it has become damaged. And with fiberglass, particularly with higher powered bows, if you've damaged it and it's cracked, what they can do is break and split into their fibers, which will then catch you as it goes past and embed itself into your hand, or even just graze you. Now, a graze and cuts and stabbing injuries from fiberglass is a bit more of a problem than you might think, because all those little tiny microfibers tend to come off and they can leave themselves in your skin, basically, like a tiny porcupine. And you know, the least of your worry with that is it's going to itch and drive you mad. Bigger problems are, you know, infections from little bits of fluff getting under your skin and things like that. So it's pretty common sense that you wouldn't use a damaged arrow anyway, let's be fair. But that, for a beginner guide to archery, is just about all we really need to say. So I hope that's given you some ideas. If you've done archery before, you've probably not that much used to, but I hope that's given you some good ideas and some good information to get yourselves shooting, because it is a fantastic sport. It's certainly a good way to spend an afternoon. But and as I did say at the start, there is many layers and levels to it. You can just keep going. You can just keep introducing more and more skills to it, really. So I may at some point make a follow-up video, higher levels of archery, maybe with sight systems on them. Also, another favourite of mine, which I've been working on, is speed shooting and differences, because what we've talked about is largely just target archery. Pretty simple, static, stood still, aiming at a target. If you look into like military archery, and you know, you can go on YouTube and see some fantastic archery works. That's all I'm doing today is beginning it and getting you into it. I'm not leaping about off tables like Legolas and doing that sort of stuff, though I am personally working on speed shooting, different techniques, researching all sorts of stuff. Like, apparently a lot of military archers would keep their arrows in the bow hand so that they could bring them straight onto the bow and shoot off either side. It's hard to shoot off the other side with a recurve. You need a different sort of bow. But lots of different techniques like that. And as I get better at that and go through that, I may make some more videos about that sort of stuff and things. Other than that, folks, as always, get yourselves out there, get bushcrafting, get doing archery, be safe, and enjoy yourselves with it. Have some fun, and I will see you guys all very soon, I hope. And I know I already said this in the last video I did, but Happy New Year.